Welcome to the Kynective Media podcast, and I'm your host, Jules Nadalin. What if the way we think about money is holding us back? Today joining us is Santiago Pinto, owner of the Pinto Financial Group, representing Cooperators, and he's going to help us rethink financial literacy, cash flow, investing, and shifting our mindset for long-term success. Welcome, Santiago. I'm super excited to have you here. We're going to talk about something that everybody's interested in, money and money management. For our listeners today, do you want to give them a little bit of background about you, your history in the workspace, and anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity to be able to share some information and give some value. I started in the industry 10 years ago within the retail banking sector while attending Western University, and quickly realized that I enjoyed working in financial services, went on to becoming a senior advisor within the retail bank, but then moved on to specializing in wealth management, started my certified financial planning designation, and eventually had the opportunity in 2019 of actually buying a practice with Cooperators to have an independent practice, and have been practicing ever since.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
That's quite an exciting journey. And that happened, in like 2 years? Just kidding. I think you've been at it for about 10 years now.
10 years. Yeah, that's right. Started with TD in 2016, and then just every year or two, kind of moved up into a different role. And until in 2019, coming up on 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to buy. So it's been really rewarding. And now I run a team of 8, doing financial services, insurance, and everything that's to do with financial planning.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about financial literacy, because I feel as a society, we don't get a lot of education. We don't get a lot of support. I think 2/3 of individuals, like Canadians polled, say they didn't receive enough financial literacy and education in school. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about financial literacy.
Yeah, that statistic holds true for sure in my experience. When I get together with individuals, usually they're individuals who are being referred to me by somebody who has had the opportunity to work with me or with other planners, and they know what services are available out there. But for the most part, when I'm just out and about and someone asks me what I do and I say I'm a financial planner, they don't really even know what that means. Like, okay, so you work with companies, like, or you work with whatever. And so I think there's just not a curriculum or anything that's really put in place in the public school system that can help people to even understand where to go and how to navigate the financial services industry. So that's something that I'm really passionate about. I view my job as primarily just educating the public on that. And then putting myself in a position where I can offer some of the best options.
Okay. I know we had talked offline a little bit about how, like, even you were in high school and didn't think this could be your career path. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I was sharing that, even in senior year, because originally I actually wanted to go into law enforcement. I was looking at being a detective or a lawyer. And so after talking to many law enforcement officers, they said, they don't really even consider you till your late 20s. So you should go find another career path. But in my senior year, I remember talking to a friend who said he wanted to do wealth management. And that was the first time I had even heard of that career path. And I thought, what? There's a job where you just manage people's money? Like, how's that even work? And so it sounds obvious now, obviously in hindsight, but it's just crazy to me that, graduating high school, I had no idea that was even a service that was available. And I think part of the assumption there is they think not everybody's going to need money management help. But I believe that's not true. I think everybody does. Even if you have a little, you don't have to have $1 million to have to hire someone to help you. Just with whatever you do have, if you can get some education, get some support, that's how you can turn a little into a lot.
Yeah, I think we all need some help when it comes to money management. We live in a really disposable, convenient society. When you look at like things like Uber Eats and DoorDash and Amazon, where it's instant gratification, and that's sort of being programmed through technology in our mindsets. And I mean, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of hitting that buy button, that emotional purchase. And it adds up really, really quickly. And when you start sitting down and looking at your finances and where the pitfalls are and where the opportunities are, it can be really overwhelming. So let's talk a little bit about access to inclusion in finance. Like, what does gatekeeping look like? Because I feel like access, when we talk about literacy, no education in literacy and financial literacy, and who gets left out, and why is there gatekeeping in this world?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think to kind of give a little bit of the lay of the land for the industry, part of the issue is that most decisions in financial services are driven purely by economics, meaning they're not necessarily people first decisions or values decision. And so the way that looks like is if you go to a retail bank and you ask for, Fidelity funds or Mackenzie funds or just independent funds, you can't get access to those with advice with a financial planner until you have at least $500,000. Sometimes it takes up to $2 million to get access to some of the services, such as the private investment banking or Dominion Securities or Wood Gundy, Nesbitt Burns. Like every bank has its private division that really is there to help those who already have a substantial amount of money. Everybody else gets stuck with the retail sector buying the proprietary products. So every bank, BMO is going to sell you the BMO funds, TD is going to sell you the TD funds, RBC is going to sell you the RBC funds, and so on and so forth. And so those funds are not being offered because they're the best options for the consumer, for the client. They're being offered because they're the most lucrative for the bank, because the bank's fiduciary responsibility is to profit the shareholder and not defraud the client, right? So by giving their own proprietary products, that's what's going to be most profitable for the shareholder, not necessarily the best option for the client.
And you've worked with the big banks, and you've worked with credit unions as well.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple of the big banks, and that's how I learned that. But even in my tenure there, it wasn't until I stepped out of that space that I realized how detrimental that was. Because when I moved into wealth management within the credit unions, where I was able to now offer more unbiased advice, I realized that the rate of return and the comparison in performance was a whole nother thing. And I think that they would tell us in the banks, don't really worry about the rate of return in that. Just try to help people save. All investments are kind of the same. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. So it wasn't until I had an opportunity to start doing some analysis and starting my CFP that I started really realizing, wow, there's a lot of gatekeeping here, because the people who are stuck just dealing with the banks, it's going to be hard for them to get ahead with these funds that are underperforming all the time.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, with working with you and your company, there is no, like, you don't need that $500,000 or the $250,000 to start investing.
That's right. So we don't have an asset minimum, and that's a Cooperators, an independent decision, because they are a people over profits organization. Their governance structuring is a member-owned organization. And so they're looking at making sure that the decisions are sustainable. So we have to make money, but making money is not the only purpose, right? And so our mission is to create financial stability for Canadians and their communities. That's the Cooperators mission statement. And they view unbiased financial advice as fundamental to that mission statement.
I was literally having dinner with my daughter last night and talking about you. And, she's in second year university, and she's stressed about, her money management and, paying off her student loans like everybody. And I'm like, it's not too early to start. It's not too early to start. And I'm like encouraging her to connect with someone like yourself to get a plan in place. She's squirreling away her money. I swear that woman has more money than me sometimes, because mom pays for everything. It's like we go for dinner, it's the usual. And I'm like, why? Like, where are you putting your money? And she's like, oh, I have this savings account with, XYZ bank. And I'm like, is it making you money though? Because if you're going to sit on all that money and not buy me dinner, how can we make more money with you? Do you have any advice to like someone in their 20s around that? Is it too early to make that phone call with you?
No, I think that it's too early to make a projection for retirement because you don't even know what career you're going to have, what income flow and everything like that. But it's definitely not too early to have a discovery meeting and just start seeing whether you have cash flow systems set up, whether you have a good financial management system set up, what your relationship to money is, and just starting to understand even just principles like time value of money. Every dollar you invest when you're 20 has the potential to become $60 over your lifetime. Whereas when you wait till you're 30 or 40 or 50, every dollar you invest when you're 50 only has the potential to become $6 by the time you're retired. So that time is your number one asset when it comes to investing. And so young people have that. They have that and they don't even really realize how significant the decisions they make with money can be. And so just building out that engine just makes you so much more prepared for when you go into a career. Then you already know what to do. You say, hey, I went from making $25,000 in part-time work to now I got my first job and I'm making $60,000, $70,000. Like, you have an engine that money's ready to go through. And so I love getting together with people in last year university or even in university or college and just saying, okay, let's get some of the principles laid out. And then once you graduate and get a career started, like we will have a foundation to build on.
Yeah. And that's probably great because I'm sure they're like, your first career, you're like, woo, I'm going to go on a vacation and I'm just going to, you have access to money that you don't. That sounds like me these days sometimes. You don't have access to money more than you did before when you were like a cash-strapped student. So yeah, that's great advice. Like start early. And I think it also, we talk about financial literacy. That's the first stepping stone is breaking down like the scary conversation. I may not have money now, but let's change our mindset about money, right? So we're talking about exploring like long-term versus short-term investing behaviors, right? I think you called it turtle brain versus rabbit.
Yeah, so there's a concept in behavioral economics that focuses on the predictable rationalities of consumers. So in the 80s, the traditional economic model was that consumers were rational. They weighed the pros and cons, looked at their budget, made decisions. And then they did a series of tests and studies and basically realized, no, that can't be further from the truth. Basically, people just buy kind of compulsively. They use a lot of shortcuts in reasoning to make decisions. And there's all kinds of marketing and visual merchandising that kind of trips people into buying compulsively with decoys and all this stuff. So there's and credit card companies know this. That's why it's one of the most lucrative products out there are credit cards, but they're free. But what happens is 80% of the time people get stuck with credit card balances. And that's because credit card companies are using that human psychology, behavioral economics to their advantage, knowing that if we give people free credit and we give a 20-day grace period, they're going to estimate how much money they're making, and they're going to land themselves in a balance 80% of the time. And that's the research, and that is what we find. So you can take that research and flip it to your advantage and say, okay, knowing that, can I build a system while in turtle brain, so rational thinking brain, which is the slower part, and where we basically only think that way for 10% of the time, when we can actually sit down and kind of work through problems, so that when we're in the other mode of thinking, rabbit brain, 90% of the time, we can't really mess things up. And that's what financial management and cash flow strategies is about building those tracks so that you can have more success managing your money without as much, attention to it, kind of automating it and setting up the framework so you can't really mess it up.
Okay. And you support people with cash flow strategies for real life. Like when we talk about Canadians right now, I think the stats are like 55% more people are describing themselves as financially paralyzed, especially with the cost of living going up. We're looking at the cost of groceries and, we're seeing a shift in rent's going down a little, but, it's been, high for years. So, and people feel like they're in constant state of chaos. So can you talk about some of the things you do for cash flow strategies or advice for people listening here about cash flow strategies?
Yeah, for sure. So basically there's 4 keys to a cash flow strategy or financial management strategy. And even before I share what those are, I just want to highlight that cash flow management, financial management is the first pillar of a financial plan. So often that's overlooked and financial services advisors, they just want to talk about the product, the life insurance, the whole life, the infinite banking, the mutual fund, the stock, whatever. But you could have an amazing investment strategy, but a bad cash flow strategy, and it won't be sustainable because the person's going to end up going into debt, needing to pull that money back out. So you have to start at the foundation. And financial management is pillar 1 of 5 for financial planning. So just to quickly run through those, because I think it's important for people to see, okay, what's the full picture of a financial plan? Financial management, insurance and risk management, investments and wealth management, retirement and taxation planning, and estate and legal considerations. That's the areas that a certified financial planner are trained to help you navigate. And so when you've gone through all 5 of those for you, then you have a full financial plan, right? Otherwise, you just have financial products that are kind of incoherent, not really working together towards any vision or any projection or anything like that. Okay, so that aside, financial management, there's 4 keys to a cash flow strategy. 1, you need to have a budget. Okay, now before I go any further, people don't like the word budget. They associate
nobody likes budgets.
Yeah, they're like, I don't want to. You're losing me here. So I immediately just lean in on that. Like, don't worry. I know budgets don't work. I think some of the research showed that people who do have budgets, 80% of the time can't stick to them. So that's why it's only step 1. It's not even half the picture. So step 1 is, but you still need to see that, you have expenses and income and that the line is black, like that you're not going into debt every month, that you have a surplus, you're making more than you're spending, right? So we need to see that picture. And then how we implement the budget, that's where you get into cash flow strategies. So, objective 2 is to kind of isolate all the fixed expenses from the variable expenses and try to manage your variable expenses separately. So there's a few ways to do that. You can do that by taking out the variable on a weekly basis in cash, or by separating it with a different checking account and moving money into that. But the other key in managing that separately is that you manage it on a weekly basis. So if you said, look, for groceries, gas, entertainment, my variables that are kind of, week to week that are that category, toiletries, I need $2,000 a month. Okay. Take whatever that is, 24,000, divided by 52, so that you get your weekly value. And if that's, $350, $400, whatever that is, you manage that on a week to week basis. Because there's a lot of research that shows when you give someone $2,000 a month for variable expenses, 85% of the time, they're out of money by week 3. So we just always overestimate how much that's going to be for the month. But if you get that $300, $400 a week, whatever that equivalent is, then the research showed that 95% of the time people carried a surplus every week to week. So we're really good at managing on a 7-day schedule. And it makes sense because, like, if you have that $400 and now, now it's Thursday and you have $200, the fridge is full of groceries, you can say, hey, you know what, we can go out to eat tonight. Like, there's another $400 coming on Monday. And it just becomes really easy. Like, you're managing 7 days. And once you isolate that, now you know, and you actually test that that's true. Now you know that your surplus and your budget is accurate, right? So key 3 is to then start saving for some of the short-term things that are coming up, like a vehicle replacement, real estate maintenance, emergency savings,
vacations,
like those kind of things that from a human psychology perspective, this is often neglected, but it's so important that part of your financial planning has rewards for yourself quickly. Because if all of your planning is to be rewarded in 30 years, you're going to lose interest.
No one's going to commit.
I want to do this plan. Yeah, like I want to live today. So it's important that you use some of the money to live today. It's okay to plan for an annual vacation. It's good, actually. I encourage it. And sometimes I surprise my clients where it's like, okay, we have this 10 grand. I want you to put aside 3 grand for a vacation. And they're like, wow, really? Like, that's amazing. And now they're encouraged to hear that.
And that's completely exclusive of your weekly budget. So that
right.
goes into. So when we talk about, you have $400 a week for groceries and things that you need, that's completely separate. So,
Correct.
that's not a chip away. It's a long-term goal
That's right.
for later. And then things like rent, that's a fixed.
Correct.
And that's completely planned on a separate level.
That's right. So that's why there's like 4 layers to it. So layer 1 is all of your fixed obligations that, your income's coming in, those obligations are coming out. Okay. Then we want to isolate for the variable expenses that are week to week just to live. And we want to control those and manage those separately. Then we have the surplus. So for some people, it's 10 grand a year. Some people it's 30 grand a year. But that surplus is what just dissipates when you don't manage it, when you don't control it. And so what you want to do with that surplus is say, okay, let's take a portion of that, half of that, whatever you want, and let's put it towards savings accounts that are meant to be used on an annual basis. So the vacations, the emergencies, And then the 4th key is now we have really, truly, sustainably isolated what sustainable investing you can do. So if you have a 30K surplus and you put 15K towards those annual savings, now you have 15K a year that can actually go into retirement investing or other long-term goals. Like someone might say, well, I want to buy a house in 5 years. Okay, well, let's open up the accounts to invest accordingly with that 15 grand surplus. And then also I want to be retired by 55 or 60. Okay, let's work on a projection to see how much of that 15 grand needs to go into RSPs so that you can achieve that. So once you have the cash flow, like the rest of the pillars can be built. But often people aren't getting the support to build out those strategies. And so they're just getting financial products and say, well, yeah, I don't know where I'll be for retirement. I have an RSP at this company, and I think I have a TFSA with my employer. And then I think I have a life insurance with my group. And it's like, but they don't have any vision of their finances or any indication of where they're going.
I wish I had met you in my 20s, honestly. You said retire at 55, 60. Like, no, I don't think any of us in my age group think we're going to retire. We think we're going to work till we're like 90.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the biggest compliment I hear from my clients is once I do a financial plan and they turn around and say, I wish I would have met you when I was 20. That to me is like so rewarding. Which then I turn it on them and say, well, but now your daughter can, right? Or your son can, because like then they can have that opportunity when they're 20 to be empowered, educated, and ready at that time, right? So anyway, and then that's where they get that light bulb moment where it's like, yeah, I can, not to put it this way, but it's like end the generational pattern.
Yes, let's end the generational patterns, please.
Yeah.
So if anybody's listening there and you've got, anybody in your life, like children, even yourself, like, and I hope you're listening to this podcast and there's light bulb moments and, reach out to someone who can support you. I don't know who you could reach out to, maybe someone I'm talking to right now. Yeah. I'm going off topic here, but I know that the services you offer through the Cooperators group is quite different because it's personalized. It's so personal. I don't want to sound this as a negative. It's not hand holding, but you're literally taking someone's needs, addressing it, holding their hands, supporting them through cash flow strategies, and like teaching them how to change their behaviors around money and their mindset. And, giving them opportunities beyond like GICs and TFSAs that you're seeing in the big bank spectrum, which are products, not services. So you're service-based and you're an independent broker. So you have different regulations. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about those?
Yeah, that's right. So, and that's part of navigating the industry is it's not, once you see it, then it's clear why it's set up that way. Is the banks, when I worked there, for example, I was assigned over 1,000 clients. there's no way I can talk to 1,000 clients in a year. Like I'd have to be having 3-4 meetings a day, which was kind of their expectation. But if that's the case, then there's no way I can do any hand holding. It's like whatever I can get done for you in this 1 hour, that's what we're going to get done, because then I have another hour and another hour. And some days I'd have 6 appointments. And then the next day is the same. So there's not really time to do any hand holding, following up, building out tailored plans. And that's fine, because that's the way that the banking system views itself, as like a big factory, just kind of putting through masses. And so there's a lot of cookie cutter approaches, and you have to set it up that way when your goal is to maximize volume and transactions for shareholders. Right. So again, I'm not knocking them. That's just understanding the philosophy, the structure, the environment. So, but the point is, you don't have to go there. Like, you can seek out an independent advisor who can take the time, who has ownership, who has a practice, who's willing to meet with you. And that might be a little bit of work, because there is a lot of independent advisors who will have minimums. Because they have that ability to make the decision. They say, no, unless you have 200 grand, I'm not working with you, because I need to make at least $1,000 on the next 8 hours or whatever, right? They're trying to calculate. So it does vary. And even within cooperators, you do have that sometimes, because the individual agency is operated that way. What I can say is, for the most part, most cooperators advisors are going to be happy to talk to you at any asset level. I'm one of those advisors, even though, I know it'd be more profitable, more lucrative to set a minimum. I just view it as a first generation immigrant. I know my parents would have been so much further ahead if they didn't get stuck in that cog of, well, you don't have it now, so you're never going to have it, or you can talk to us once you figure it out yourself. And so that's really where I'm putting values over pure economics, and saying, you know what, but I can change someone's life who's perpetually going into debt, to help them get that financial freedom, start saving, and actually be able to retire. That to me is much more rewarding than helping someone with $5 million get to $10 million. Like, my personal opinion.
I had a moment when you said immigrant, because my parents were both immigrants who moved here from northern Italy. And, I look back at access to money my dad had. And he was like that typical Italian man who put the cash in like a shoebox,
Right.
And that's kind of what I was taught, It's like, hide your money in the mattress.
Yeah.
I'm like being very stereotypical of my dad. And as he aged, like he needed some help with his money management. And I was like, oh my God, you could have done so much more with what you had, and this goes back to like what you were touching, is like generational mindsets and access to financial literacy. And I feel like there's so much opportunity for anybody out there to just change their lives and start saving and planning earlier on. Sorry, I got completely off topic. You gave me a light bulb moment. And again, right now I'm just thinking, is there anything that you want to share beyond the conversation that we've had that I maybe haven't touched upon? I mean, we're looking at the landscape right now. You want to talk about what's changed? I mean, maybe people out there don't understand the difference between a GIC, a TFSA, why they're good, why they're bad. We're assuming the knowledge base of someone who's listening.
For sure. And I think that's where, like, my main goal in doing some mass education, because it's different when I have an individual in front of me and I can kind of pick through specifically what would benefit them, depending on their circumstance, their goals, the context, all those things. But when talking to like a large group, let's say, and just kind of putting out some information, my biggest advice would be to look for an unbiased advisor. So look for someone who actually has access to doing independent research, who can say, like, I've looked at all the options and, here's what I'm providing. Because even with companies like IG or just different companies that are independent like that, Asante is another big one. you have to do a little bit of digging because their parent companies are fund companies. So IG's parent company is the same company that owns Mackenzie. And so often what you find with IG is a lot of proprietary IG funds. And same thing with Asante. Asante is owned by CI Global Asset Management. So often what you find there is just a bunch of CI funds. And so really like the biggest thing is to go try to navigate finding unbiased advice. It's incredibly hard to do. And it makes sense because economically, that's the most profitable thing is for these fund companies to buy the distribution and make sure that they sell only their fund or to really incentivize that. And it's not ethical. There's been class action lawsuits that have been settled by RBC and by different banks and by different fund companies for pushing, their own advice or their own funds, incentivizing to sell their own funds. Companies should be product agnostic. They shouldn't have an incentive to sell one fund over the other, but it does happen. And so that's why it's important to work with an institution where that's not even on the table. Like, they're truly independent. That they're going to bring unbiased advice. And that's actually the reason I came here. The credit unions started leaning that way to have a kind of a proprietary offering. Really every credit union is different on this because they're all run somewhat independently, but some credit unions took a hard and fast approach to they're only going to sell that fund. And the credit union I was working at was saying, we're going to sell that fund to everybody under this asset level. And they were starting to create some gatekeeping, which I thought, no, I can't get behind this because I wouldn't sell this fund to my parents. It's a very poor performing fund. That's the way I look at it, is I wouldn't put my money in there. You're asking me to sit across from somebody and tell them, yes, that's where I recommend you put your money, when I don't. So so it didn't work for me. And again, you can justify things and find a way to be there. I'm not making a judgment on the people who do work there and do that, because often they're just, doing their job. But I decided I'm going to move to where I can continue to offer unbiased advice. And so now I have Pinto Financial Group working with Cooperators, being completely transparent. If that ever changes, then Pinto Financial Group will be going elsewhere. I am going to always go where I can offer unbiased advice for my clients.
Okay, great. Just because you sort of said your company name, how could someone after this podcast get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out? I will put this in the show notes. So your website, do you have a website?
So I do have a website where you can schedule a call. I also have a virtual calendar where people can schedule a call, and then honestly, just by email. You want to,
and LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably one of the best spots because it's the most objective. It's the most direct to me. Whereas through the website, it kind of gets brought to the office, and then it might take a minute for us to pick it up. But LinkedIn is right away, and I'd be happy to sit down with anybody and have a conversation. But I do want to say what I'm saying is true, regardless of whether you reach out to me or not, because there's other really good independent advisors around. As much as I would love to increase my business and work with individuals, I don't want them to miss the fact that independent advice and the way to navigate the industry. You might have a friend who is already in the industry that this makes you think of and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to reach out to Johnny then, because he's been telling me about, and he's working with an independent firm, and see if now you can show up with those educated questions and say, hey, do you have access to unbiased investment advice? Do you have access to, do you have asset minimums? Would you be willing to work with me? Are you going to help me with a financial management strategy? Are you going to help me with a cash flow? Are you going to do projections for me? Those are the questions. Those are the interview questions that you should have to hire a financial planner. And there's a big difference between a financial agent or a banking rep and a financial advisor and a financial planner. All of these words, they're heavily regulated by advocates and FP Canada and all these different regulatory organizations. If you don't have any accreditation, you can't call yourself a financial advisor. You're a financial agent. So if you're dealing with someone who's a banking rep, again, they might be fine for opening an account or a credit card or whatever, but they're not trained or accredited in retirement planning, in financial projections. To be a financial advisor, you have to get a PFA, professional financial advisor designation. So at that point, then you have a little more accreditation, but the CFP is the gold standard, or the QAFP. When someone's a financial planner, then that's the highest designation that you can obtain in the designation of financial advice, or in the field of financial advice. So that would be the other piece I would look at, is look for someone who's accredited and working with an unbiased organization, and then you should be in a much better position than, just walking into the bank not knowing what to ask or where to go.
Yeah, because most of us just don't actually know the ask, what to ask, and what direction to go to. And I love that you are so people focused, like client focused, that, you're completely transparent. And I want to thank you for being like, this isn't about me. This is about who's listening. Santiago, thank you again for being on the podcast. And I if you're listening and you're like, yeah, this means something to me and I need to share it with someone, please do share this podcast, because we want to get this out to the world. And I just, again, thank you for everything today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate.
Hopefully we can do round two. We'll do round two. Yeah. We'll dig a little deeper.
Yeah. If any listeners have any questions and they decide, we get a few going where we can jump on another call and hammer out some of those questions coming in, I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good
Let's
value.
Make that happen. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So remember, money isn't just about numbers. It's about changing the way we feel and think about it. A big thank you to Santiago today for sharing his insights. And if you'd like to stay connected with him, you can find all his contact information in our show notes. Thanks for listening. And as always, stay curious, stay connected, and keep telling the stories that matter.